Welcome to the Dirt on Growing, where we don't just plant seeds, we plant ideas that challenge the norm. I'm your host, Brandon Rust from Full Crop Sciences, and this is the podcast where living soil meets real science. From worm castings to bottled nutrients, microbial inoculants, and chemical pesticides, we're here to question the trends, break down the data, and empower your grow. It's time to think deeper and grow better.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Dirt on Growing. So today we're going to be talking about stopping fungus before it starts. It is that time of year. It is fall time. And you guys all know what that means. It means pathogen invasion. Not always, but it's always best to do preventative measures, because right now is the season where things like powdery mildew start to come in and affect plants. With these cooler temperatures and high humidity is the conditions that powdery mildew likes to grow at, and it will affect, it'll affect your plants negatively. It's, it can be tough to deal with if it gets out of control, and there are ways that you can prevent it. Also, it's that time of the season where everything is in heavily flowering, and if you get any type of wet conditions, you can end up with botrytis or bud mold. So I want to talk about particularly these two funguses because it's that time of year where we're going to start seeing more and more of it. And we talk about powdery mildew. Different powdery mildew species will infect different types of crop species. So we're not necessarily going to cross-contaminate crops. If we have something on our squash or our pumpkins, it's not necessarily going to jump over to our tomatoes or peppers or any of our medicinal plants. So that's something that to be aware of, but it's still really beneficial to pre-treat plants before it gets to that point. And then another thing that that happens, unfortunately, is botrytis. So if we get really wet conditions, or if we're getting to dew point in the morning. So a good example is if it's humid and it starts getting really cool, especially you'll see this in the morning where you'll see morning dew. What's happening is the water in the atmosphere is actually condensing. And so you're reaching dew point, and that relative humidity on and around plants can really spike the level of potential pathogens or pathogen infection, especially in tight clustered medicinal plants. They can get botrytis really, really easily. And so botrytis can also come not just from those types of environmental conditions, but unfortunately we have to deal with caterpillars. Right. And so oftentimes what you'll see is mechanical damage from caterpillars, along with the feces from those caterpillars, will cause pathogen explosion on and inside of our flowers. So, going back to the best preventatives, it's one of the things that I always talk about, and you guys will always hear me mention it. You guys already know what it is. It's Trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis, right? One of the benefits of these microorganisms, especially to kill different types of fungal pathogens, is their ability to create a metabolite called chitinase. It's, just like Beauveria bassiana produces chitinase to get through the exoskeleton of an insect. Most fungal pathogens, their actual structures are made from chitin. And so Trichoderma and the Bacillus can actually degrade those fungal filaments and outright kill a lot of those types of pathogens. But they also produce some selective antimicrobial compounds, and they also produce hormones and other signaling molecules that will actually upregulate some genetic responses. Because what happens here is some of these metabolites, right, they're causing a cascade of events to happen when it is producing something like a certain type of enzyme, and that actually it's like a key, right, that turns on a transcription event through a cascade of events, so it can upregulate the plant's natural defense systems. It's called acquired systemic resistance, or systemic acquired resistance. And so if you pre-treat earlier or throughout the season, you're far less likely to get a pathogen infection at these particular times when, it's either our environment is conducive or we have some type of other external pressure, right? It can help mitigate both biotic, so any type of bacterial or biological stress, whether it's mechanical damage from insects or whether it's attack from different types of microbes, any type of biological stress, and then abiotic, which is an environmental stress. The microbes have the ability to both regulate the plant's ability to fight those different types of stresses. And some of those stresses are a little bit different, right? Some of them are, the plant will naturally produce defense compounds, right? Like ROS species react, like these oxygen species, which go out and can disrupt the feeding of insects, or they can disrupt and kill off pathogens that are invading. These species are things like H₂O₂, so hydrogen peroxide, right? Hydrogen peroxide, H₂O₃, and some other types of compounds that can affect the way other types of fungal organisms attack plants, and it can kill them off with that. But these species, they also degrade cellular membranes as well. And so what happens is it's not just killing off the invading microorganism, but it's also causing necrosis in that area of the plant, right? And so what happens is some of these other microorganisms will produce the cure to that after they're released, right? So they want to release these defense chemicals, but they don't want to completely ruin their biological systems and degrade everything. They just want to kill off that. So they have to send something out after to neutralize those oxygen species, right? And so some of the enzymes and some of the metabolites that they produce have the ability to neutralize those defense responses from running rampant and causing, damage to the plant. It wants to damage that pathogen, protect from that pathogen and cause the least amount of damage to the plant. And so those are like defense mechanisms, right, that work in the plant that Trichoderma and Bacillus can help facilitate, right? It can facilitate defense through abiotic and biotic stress chemicals. It also directly affects those microorganisms through a couple of ways, right? So if you were doing applications on the phyllosphere or the surface of those leaves, and the plant is colonizing those surfaces, then you're less likely to get another spore from an invading pathogen to be able to colonize that same area, right? Because they're already protected and they're already colonized by those beneficial microorganisms. And I know it's late in the season, and you're probably thinking, well, can I actually apply these things? And the answer is yes. Our products, because there's no carrier. There's no carrier, it's just pure spores. So it would just be like if you were spraying water on your plant. And if it's already raining and in conditions like where you're in full flowering, like I was really worried the other day because it looked like we were going to get rain. It was really overcast. I could feel all the humidity in the air, and I have things that are really, big, bulky flowers. And I'm going, man, if it rains, I'm going to have to come out here and immediately spray afterwards. So microbes naturally protect from pathogens, but again, it's not about just treating them when something happens. It's about being proactive. We've heard it, and I've said it countless times before, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Oftentimes what I see is people will come to me and say, hey, do you have something that can treat this issue that I'm having? And I say, yes, I do have something that can help mitigate its spread. Let's say powdery mildew, for instance. If you're having really bad powdery mildew, right, just doing your spray applications may not completely eliminate it, right? You need to address all of the core issues that surround that problem. And a good example for powdery mildew, right? How do I prevent powdery mildew, or how do I combat it once I actually have it? And oftentimes it is environmental. So let's look at things like our VPD. Can we control it? If we're outdoors, there's oftentimes, if we're just pure outdoors, there's nothing we can do about it. It's like we're going to have to roll with the punches and do our best to pre-treat and do pre-preventative, post-preventative if it rains. So there's, application rates may change if you're outdoors because you can't control things like your environment. But let's say you're indoors, right? Making sure that your room isn't getting too cold and too humid, because high humidity and cooler temperatures are the types of conditions that powdery mildew really likes. And so it'll grow. Also, conditions where you don't have movement of air, right? Stagnant air, where you don't have air movement. Oftentimes what I see is it's either starting in an area where you're getting really poor air movement, and you might get stagnant humidity in an area which may be far off. It's not under the lights. It's a little bit cooler, not under direct lights. And so that area might start getting infected first, and you might have a problem in isolated areas. And if you're seeing outbreak in isolated areas, it's most likely the environment, right? It's because you're not getting enough airflow to move that humidity or to move those temperatures to create a homogeneous environment in that area that you're operating in. In greenhouses, it can be really difficult, especially if you're running wet walls, right? In greenhouse conditions, the back near the wet walls have so much, they're much more humid and they're much cooler. And so oftentimes trying to mitigate that can be difficult in those types of environments or those settings. So proper air movement, right? Making sure that your plants aren't in that area. If you can't control that specific area of a greenhouse, reduce the amount of plants that you have there and try to cultivate. Maybe go 10 feet in front of the wet wall instead of 5 feet in front of the wet wall. So there's different ways depending on, those are just examples, there's different ways that you're growing different environments, and an environment has a huge impact on powdery mildew. Indoors, if you can keep your VPD proper and air movement, that's going to mitigate a lot of the problems. Now, when I talk about air movement, you don't want fans blasting your plants, right? Because that's going to cause a different type of, what do we call it? Abiotic stress. This is an environmental stress that's caused by too much airflow. If you have too much air moving under your plants, the plant stomata will eventually close, right? Which is going to decrease your transpiration rate, which is going to limit nutrient transport. So a light breeze recommended throughout. Also, having too much nitrogen can lead to a lot of problems with plant sucking insects and pathogens. So keeping your nitrogen levels in check and not over fertilizing with nitrogen is another way that can help you combat powdery mildew. Also, adequate calcium levels. I think that when we're talking about the prevention of pathogens, especially fungal pathogens, there are two nutrients that immediately come to mind that can strengthen plant defense, right? Calcium and silica. Okay. Obviously, calcium is an essential nutrient. It's considered a secondary nutrient, even though it's used in large quantities, especially in flowering. And then that silica, man. That silica is so important because silica actually functions with calcium and boron. So when when the plant is actually creating the structural component of itself, right? When it's building its structure, it uses calcium and boron, right? And it creates these lattices, these protein lattices, along with carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, but also it can incorporate silica into those matrices. And what happens is you get better rigidity, right? You get better tensile strength. You get just like silica as an element. When you have like a silica mat, it's resistant to heat, it's resistant to cold. These things become like silica, right? They become more resistant to cold. They become more resistant to heat. And so when it's actually building it, that protein structure that is the physical, the physical pieces of plant, it's incorporating silica. So calcium and silica are really, really important. And so if you're getting adequate nutrition, adequate calcium, silica, right, then you're going to, and then also if you're using microorganisms, it's like you're stacking, right, biostimulating properties, and you're basically creating all of these different things that function synergistically together. So when it comes to powdery mildew, that is one of the biggest things, right? Monitor your environmental parameters. Make sure you're not going too cool, not too humid. Make sure you have proper air movement and nutrient balance. We're taking a holistic approach. So also, let's talk about botrytis, right? So botrytis is a little bit different in the way that it functions. Similar, it's also a fungal pathogen, but it likes more warmer, humid climates, right? So botrytis, when you're trying to combat botrytis, right? Typically, if I'm indoors and I have the ability to control my environment, if I have flowers that are really stacked and really close together, they have really close sets. What I'll do is I'll decrease my relative humidity, and so I'll basically be increasing my vapor pressure deficit, and I also keep the media a little bit drier as well. I know you guys are distracting me, and so let me regroup real quick. It's really important though, but when we're looking at different types of varietals that are susceptible to botrytis indoors, it's really about environment management and water management, right? You don't want to overwater your media and get too much water into the actual plant cells, because they're so tight in the dew point in those flowers will create conditions where that botrytis can grow. So we really need to pay attention to VPD and having a higher VPD and using and having better water management practices when we're growing those types of cultivars. It's very important. So also the same thing. Nutrient management is super, super important. Whether we're talking about like tomato bottom end rot, well, again, we can go back to those same principles with calcium and silica and not over fertilizing with nitrogen, right? Anytime we're able to increase, our overall vitality of our plants through nutrient dynamics, where we're creating plants that are just healthy and they're more resilient. That is always going to be the number one thing you can do, right? Plant health through balanced nutrition, through the stimulation of beneficial microorganisms, creating conditions where you have soluble organic compounds that can transport nutrients. All of these things have a net positive effect, and it's like accumulating, right? So it's like the microbes, the calcium, the silica, the humic and fulvic acids. We're basically stacking biostimulating effects that all work synergistically together to create the best possible outcomes. So we're talking about stopping fungus, when we're talking about combating things like fusarium and pythium. Fusarium is so difficult to manage in this space because even through meristem tissue culture, it can take up to 3 generations to completely remove it. And it's like you might have something like fusarium and not even know it. You might have pythium and not ever know it. Typically what you'll see is you might have these types of microbes associated with your plant, and they're not really causing any damage. You're not seeing it expressed, but it's when you get into a condition that's non-optimal that pathogen has a chance to actually attack and strike. And so you might be running everything beautiful, and you're like 3-4 weeks into flowering, and all of a sudden, bam, half your plant dies off, and you're like, what is going on? And it's like, oh, you know what? You weren't pushing calcium hard enough, and it came to a point where you didn't have enough, and all of a sudden this pathogen just had an opportunity, and when it had that opportunity, it went full bore, right? So good thing, like Rusty Nail mentioned, hop latent viroid. Obviously, this isn't a fungal pathogen. This is a viroid, but when we're talking about maintenance and protocols to prevent these things, the way that they're transmitted is really important to understand, right? Because you can transmit things like fusarium, just like you can hop latent viroid, mechanically while you're making cuts, while you're taking clones, through your water. If you're taking clones or plants and you have them in water, right, and they're sitting there overnight while you're doing everything and getting everything prepped or whatever it is, however you do it, and you go and reuse that water, you can contaminate them, right? Or if you're in a hydroponic system, right, where you're recirculating your nutrients, right? You might have one plant in there that's affected, but you start recirculating nutrients, and next thing you know, your whole table's affected. And you're like, what the fuck's going on here? And they don't always show up, just like hop latent, right? A lot of these microbes are also latent. Not in the testing. They call hop latent because they oftentimes cannot detect it in a lab. You can usually detect any of these fungal pathogens, but the way that they operate can be latent, right? You don't, just because you have something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to express itself, right? Like fusarium. You might have fusarium, but you might have perfectly healthy plants. You might have pythium, but perfectly good, healthy plants, right? But it's when you do something wrong, when you mess up, or when there has some opportunity to strike, it does. And so taking all those preventative measures, right? Making sure your environments are correct. And we've talked about that, right? We talk about what's the right VPD, what are the proper temperatures, what's the proper relative humidity, how much water should we be? We've gone over a lot of things in other podcasts. So I encourage you to go back through the channel and watch some of these things if you haven't already and you're new. I just keep staring at this little thing right here. I got to show you guys. It's hilarious. So pumpkin habanero peppers for Halloween. I don't know if you can see it, but I carved this one up into a habanero jack-o'-lantern. Trevor was telling me I should try to go viral by eating these live. I don't know if I want to submit myself to that type of anguish, but I don't know. I'm getting distracted. I should be talking about pathogens. I'm going to open this up to the Q&A, man. You guys are always awesome. I appreciate your guys' support in supporting me as an educator, me as a businessman, and just someone that's operates in the community. And I love to see all of this familiar faces in the chat. And I will also be on the chat when Mean Gene is on there. Mean Gene and Capulator are my favorite breeders. Beside, obviously I'm my favorite. I love myself the most. But they have such great gear, and they have solid reputations in the community. And Mad Dog says, I heard worm cast tea for powdery mildew. Well, here's the thing. So when we're talking about different types of microorganisms, there are a wide diversity of different types of microorganisms in that worm compost teas. if we wanted to like look at the exact microorganisms, we'd have to do a genetic assay, and then we could identify what those are. And based off of the identification, we could figure out what type of metabolites they produce. For me, if I'm trying to prevent a problem, I like to be really direct. And that's why I do like the specific microbes, right? That's why I do the Trichoderma and the Bacillus together. If I'm doing, pest prevention, I'll do Bacillus thuringiensis, a bacteria in the Beauveria bassiana. Sometimes I'll do the Trichoderma in the Beauveria bassiana. But I oftentimes, I like the approach, right? Obviously, you'll have some benefit from using like a compost tea, a ferment. But for me, when I'm really like, hey, I have a target issue that I want to eliminate, I try to find a target solution as opposed to just, I'm going to throw the kitchen sink at it. But it can't help. And I'm not saying that that's wrong in any way. It's just me personally. I'm always like, oh, if I have an issue, I'm going directly to what I know fucking works, which is going to produce the highest amount of this particular metabolite, which is actually doing the biochemical work. But compost teas work great. Ferments, they work great. Worm teas, compost extracts, they all have beneficial microorganisms that can be used preventatively. And if you do those things, along with things like the calcium and the silica and humic and fulvic acids and microbial inoculants, basically, again, we're going back to stacking biostimulating things that have synergistic relationships with each other. And you're going to have a better chance of mitigating those types of problems, especially later in the season, right? Because again, it's powdery mildew season and it's botrytis season right now. Shawnee Mac says, I love the information. I'm glad to be here. It's the only way that I feel useful to contribute to the community that I work in. It's, for me, it's helps, obviously promote my brand. But it also helps me give back and stay engaged, figure out what other people are talking about in the community, what other people are doing, what other people are growing, any new science that comes out. Staying connected with the community is how we do this. Yep. Rusty Nail says, enough good stuff outcompetes the bad stuff. And again, it's all about stacking those biostimulating effects, because again, a lot of these things that we're adding are going to actually increase the beneficial microorganism populations. It's going to fuel them. It's going to give them food sources. It's going to give them carbon sources. Microorganisms need those nutrients too. They can utilize that calcium. They can utilize that nitrogen. Rusty Nail says, whenever I get beneficials for the garden, I always add it to the worm bin. That's a good thing too, inoculating your compost piles, your worm bins, beneficial microbes, man. You guys already know I'm all about it. Let's see. Maven says, have you heard of using morning's leaf extract as a biostimulant? I'm not sure what morning leaf extract is. So no, but I haven't heard about it. But maybe it's morning leaf extract is something that I have heard of, but in a different context. But no, not in that context. I haven't. Trent's got a garden. Welcome, Rusty Nails. Everybody that's joining, Tucker. Do it for the gram. Treat for the kids. Yeah. I have a bunch of them. These are funny because they're little. They're like pumpkin habaneros. I'm not actually sure if it's really strong. I have a little bit right here from when I cut out the eyeballs and stuff. No, not really that hot actually. Kind of floral. I could probably eat one of these just fine. Here's a question. Fabs. Ooh, now I'm getting it kind of the back of my throat a little bit. Okay. All right. I have a question about water. Why would the pH of water remain higher than 7, even when your parts per million is below 50 ppm? Well, it could be because that 50 ppm is only cations, like sodium or maybe calcium or potassium, bicarbonate. And also if your water doesn't have like, if it's got high alkalinity, then it'll be harder to bring that down. However, if your water only has 50 ppm, it's probably pretty decent water to begin with. Even if it's higher than 7, it's probably fine to use still, simply because when we're dealing with a lot of these modified growing mix, usually our pH is around 6.3 to 6.8, and it buffers that anyway. Oh, look at Trent. I love this. I love the feedback too. So whenever you guys are like, if you guys make posts on IG and social media, or if you guys ever have a chance to leave reviews, that stuff actually does help, and it shows other people like, hey, there's other people in the community that. But you're a credible mofo, Brandon. Haven't tried anything that you've suggested that hasn't worked. I'm really glad. And you know what? It reminds me twice today. So I have 2 people who are harvesting right now, and they're using. So one of them has already dried and they're in the storage phase, and one of them is just chopping and is drying right now. And they tried the new method, not the new method for me, but the new, it's not 60-60. They're trying the, 70 degrees at 40% RH. And I get so much positive feedback on it. That's like, dude, I haven't had flowers this terpy or, that store this well ever. And so, I want to see you guys be successful in all the things you do. I want to see you guys crush out all your runs. I want to see beautiful flowers. It's part of being, self-sufficient. One of the things that happened with me was I went through a lot of trauma earlier in life, and I wanted to escape this matrix, right? And cannabis I escaped the matrix for a really long time, where I lived really independently and self-sufficient, and I still do, right? Like, I don't work for somebody else. I have my own company, but I didn't pay taxes for so long when, back in the day. I was free to be my own boss, spend time where I wanted. I made my own money, how I did, producing something that I created myself. And it was like the last real American thing, in my opinion. It's I was considered an outlaw through through statutory regulation, but under common law, nothing I would have ever done would have been able to be convicted by a jury of my peers, because there was no crime, because there's no victim, right? Well, maybe stealing power, but, the power company would have had to, press charges and all that, and they didn't. So, for me, growing this plant is part of, self-sufficiency and self-reliance, and that is the biggest thing. Like, we don't need government when we're self-sufficient. We don't need government when we're self-reliant. We just need to bring back common law courts, common law for the common man, instead of having to buy into this whole thing about Americans owe $36 trillion. I don't know shit. I don't fucking owe shit. You guys printed out that fake money and then you expect my labor and everybody else's labor to pay it back. But it's those types of ideas that, like, we live in this system where we're being oppressed through debt, and being able to mitigate that through being able to produce something of substance and value without having your labor taxed and having to give away half of what you earn. And to me, that was the most truest and most American thing that I could do, was trap and grow cannabis. So I did that for so long, and now things are different. Everything's changed. And so I've had to adapt with those times, but also as an outlaw back then, I didn't have the opportunity to engage in a community like I do now. I don't get to engage with the chat. I don't get to talk and learn about all you guys and follow your guys' profiles and talk to you guys and have back and forth conversations. So, Shilbert, it was great meeting you in Barcelona the other year. Yeah, man, it was fun. I can't wait to get back out to Europe and travel more. But the thing is, I'm so focused on the business. And again, we got to get more people engaged in this. I have to figure out how to reach more people with my company so that way we can grow. Because it's hard being an entrepreneur, you know, managing overhead, managing payroll. I mean, I ain't getting rich over here. I pay myself a very, very small salary that most people wouldn't even be able to live off of. And the only reason I do that is because I don't have a huge overhead in my life. My mortgage is really low. I grow a lot of my own food. So, you know, I do this because I love it. I don't know what else I would do anyway. Can a community. What was the question? Sword Wheeler? Let's see. Sword Wheeler says, I'm seeing two of my plants on long flower landrace that are expressing leaf tip curl. Usually that's caused by too high of nitrogen. Tips are curling upwards and crispy. Environment is on point. Watering is on point. It also could be, so it could be a combination. It sounds like a combination of what would be not enough calcium and too much nitrogen, because when you get usually no, nitrogen doesn't curl up. Usually nitrogen deficiency, it curls under. So it could be just calcium deficiency. You might just need to be pushing calcium, or it could be sodium toxicity. Oftentimes when I'm thinking about leaf tip burn, the reason why is it's a osmosis issue where water isn't moving to that point. And it's usually due because of too high sodium or not enough calcium. Here's one. If I'm outdoor and find PM, would you recommend a bud wash with hydrogen peroxide and lemon juice and baking soda? Dude, I'm old school, man, and like I've seen that whole bud wash stuff, and I've seen like, look, I guess, I mean, to each their own. I'm not personally going to do it, but I'm also not going to be smoking a whole lot of outdoor. This season, I turned all my outdoor plants into seeds. You know, I made seeds. You know what I mean? Like, outdoor, in my opinion, is for rosin and for breeding projects. That's my lane for outdoor. Now, if you go and look at my IG, I posted some outdoor flower that, you know, smokes good stuff. To me, it's still mid-grade compared to my indoor. Even though it looks great for outdoor, it smokes well, it's terpy and all that. But dude, if my thing is like, if you have to wash your flower, man, it's rough, dude. I mean, I get it though. I mean, if that's your only way and that's what you got to work with, I would probably do maybe. I would maybe do like, I don't know about hydrogen peroxide, just because you're going to oxidize. It could potentially oxidize stuff. I would probably just do regular water, like distilled water, and then dry them out. But again, dude, I personally wouldn't do it. But if you didn't have a choice, man, I don't know about all this baking soda and all this other stuff, man, because I don't know if that's going to stay on there. Lemon juice and baking soda, bro. I don't know, dude. That sounds like, you know, when you mix an acid and a base together, you're going to get a reaction. And I don't know how that reaction is going to affect biological material that's about to start degrading, you know? Yeah, so is there a general list of best practices for alternaria on cannabis? Yeah, so that's what we were actually looking at. That leaf spot pathogen that I thought was leaf spot septoria turned out to be alternaria. It's just like a lot of other fungal pathogens, though. Again, I go back to Trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis. And then also, but alternaria is the problem with alternaria that's different from the leaf septoria is this, right? So alternaria can affect a wide variety of plants and hop from plant species to species. It also lives in the ground. So if you get splashed up from rain, it starts getting on those leaves, right? And then it just keeps affecting it. So it's more infectious and it can go to a lot of different plants. But so the treatment is essentially you just do more of what you would and you treat more of your property. Don't just treat your plants, treat your grass, treat the trees that are around the area that you're cultivating in. I'm going to be studying a lot more science research on alternaria just so I could see if there are any types of specific fungal microorganisms or bacterial microorganisms that have shown to be more effective than other things. So I just haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet. What I'm really working on in the background that a lot of you guys don't see is on like content creation, marketing, customer acquisition, technological integrations that can do like integrating pixels into the website so that way we can see analytics. Being able to post from one place, like I have a dashboard which integrates everything. And I can do all my work from a single dashboard to post content to any single social media platform we have. Looking at analytics, so all these things are new, and there's all these different things that we're always constantly working on, like figuring out what the best content works while we're shadow banned and working in this space. Like, what ways can we keep things like funny, lighthearted, engaging, keep people coming back, build brand trust? Those are all things that they're formulas basically, and those are things that we look at in the background. And it's just the way that I approach cultivation, right? They're all formulas. They're all things that I have to do in sequence to make something functionally work. Morninga? I haven't heard of it. No, haven't heard of it. I'll have to look into it. I've never heard of it. But again, a lot of these things are the same thing that we're repeating, right? So maybe that extract has some phytohormones or some beneficial compounds like saponins, or has some type of plant hormone associated with it, or some type of amino acid associated with it. Like, all of these things are biostimulants, and there's a wide variety of them. I mean, we're talking about different enzymes, proteins, organic acids, humic and fulvic acids, different types of phytohormones, plant hormones, different type, compounds that change the structure of soil to increase, gas exchange and water exchange. There's so many different types of biostimulants, and they all work to do different things, and they work synergistically together. All of them do. So far, so good. Sweet. I've got 3 people that are doing it right now for the first time, and they're like, "Fuck yeah!" Because they've heard me talk about it. Rusty Nails, you are an OG, man. You've got to be like my dad's age. My dad passed away, though. He passed away earlier this year in prison from a fentanyl overdose. Buddy Chuck says he doesn't want to be the devil's advocate, but how the self-reliance and indoor growing being attached to the power grid, how does that work? Well, I don't just grow indoor. So I grow a lot of food. I grow potatoes, onions, garlic, beans, pumpkin, squash. I grow tomatoes. I grow, everything that you need to basically make huevos rancheros from scratch, and then some. I even got chickens and eggs. Obviously, having to be reliant on the power grid, it doesn't make you sustainable. So you're absolutely right in that regard. But it does make you less reliant on having to purchase your flower from another company or from a dispensary. Which, look, as a home grower and as somebody who owns a dispensary and grow, which finally going to be getting that fucking thing turned on. I advocate people to grow their own, even though I'd love for you to, purchase what I have, right? But I understand what you're saying, man. I mean, ideally, the ideal situation would be able to generate your own power that can pump your own well water, and bam, then you don't have to. Then you're completely independent. The thing is, like, our government, through the U.S. Patent and Trademark offices, they will suppress any type of energy technology that could potentially be disruptive to the corporate structure that's in place. And they do that because it's a matter of national security, right? Which is fucking bullshit. They just want to suppress the ability for people to be self-sufficient and generate their own power and all that stuff, because the government needs your reliance, right? The only reason that government is so big right now is because so many more people are reliant on it, right? If you cut your ties to the government, you don't need them to this. You don't pay them taxes. Then it goes away because they can't self-sustain itself, right? That beast, that monster, like it has to be funded, right? It has to be funded. And if we're not funding it, then it goes away. So like self-sufficiency is basically the way to peacefully protest against all forms of government, right? Self-reliance and independence comes through your ability to produce off of your own land. Yeah, dude, it's crazy. I love this topic. I know we're just ranting now. We're gone past our talk about microbes and fungus. But it is absolutely crazy how the Boston Tea Party was over like 1% tax, and now like look at Michigan. They're going to be sitting at, I think, 47 fucking percent, right? So it's impossible to operate a business, right? And that's the whole purpose of them doing it, is they want to shut the shit down. They're like, fuck this. They know how much money Michigan is making and how much the community and how much independent businesses are, and they want to conglomerate that all into a few fucking businesses, which can be attached to a fucking lobby group, which can help control political climate. It's fuckered, man. Fuck those motherfuckers, dude. I hate it. No taxation without representation. What happened to the basis of America, right? They're always talking about, oh, we live in a democracy. We live in a democracy. Fuck democracy, because we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutionally protected republic where everybody has individual rights. All this democratic bullshit, it allows 51% of the population to control 49% of the population. That sounds like servitude, not freedom to me. So I would say fuck that one. Self-sufficiency, independence. If we could find a way to get off grid without having to, that's the way I feel. And I get all worked up about it because I'm literally playing a game right now. I have a corporation. I'm trying to change industrial systems, right? I'm literally going into this thing head deep to try to literally change the way resources are managed, energy is managed, farming practices are managed. That is my fucking goal. That's why we are doing all of these things to move forward. But I would be absolutely just fine selling my property, moving to the middle of nowhere, and living off grid for the rest of my life. Because one, I know I could do that because I know how to raise chickens. I can raise fucking goats. I know how to cultivate food. I mean, if I had access to moving water, I could generate my own electricity. How do you trap cannabis? You know cannabis that runs away from you. Products do great anywhere. All the products do good on the West Coast, East Coast, doesn't matter. There's people from all over that are purchasing from us. You know, we send everywhere. Make sure you guys go tap in too. Save 20. Save 20 right now is 20% off. So you can go to the website and go pick up any of our products right now. Tell your friends. Buddy Chuck says he grows more than he can smoke every year. So he's good. The only thing he wish he could grow more plants, but 12 is my limit. 24 is my tops with autoflowers. Yeah, I always go way over limit. But I also suffer from a condition called OCD, is obsessive cannabis disorder, and the only cure for me is unlimited plant counts. I mean, I got to be able to look at stuff. I got to be look at all these new things and see how things are growing and have a really good gauge on like what's going on. So I got to have more plants, man. It's in my blood. Yeah, not my service. Have I ever heard of using colchicine? It sounds familiar, but my brain isn't braining on that word right now. Looking like a young Arthur Shelby. I have no idea who Arthur Shelby is, Cheddar Bob. Let's see. Do I still sell soil? Who do you recommend in OK for soil if you do not offer it? Oh, I do sell soil, but I only sell it in bulk. Minimum quantity that you can get from me is 6 yards. So, yes, I do sell soil, but I only sell in bulk, man. It doesn't make sense for me to sell soil in bags because, one, there's not enough people that are buying bagged soil out here. And then it doesn't make sense for me to ship it logistically because the cost of shipping the soil, like let's say I sell you guys a 2 cubic foot bag for $24.99. The shipping on it is like 70 or $80. So it doesn't make sense from a logistics standpoint to even offer it. I wish I could, it would be great if I had like some huge distributor that was like, look, we're going to take, 1,000 yards pallet, on pallets in bags, and then we'll distribute it for you. So that way we can have it all over the US. That would be great. But nobody's reached out and been like, hey, let's, do this thing. Trying to catch up on these comments, man. I'm way behind. All right, now I'm back up. Caught back up. Holy Toledo says he actually bud washes all the time. Just wanted to see people's reaction if it doesn't affect your terp or quality. I've done it once because I wanted to actually see it because I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. And when I did it, it made my weed oxidize. It turned brown like really quickly. Not like immediately, but like it turned brown in my jars way faster than normal. Like my weed doesn't usually turn brown in jars as long as I, keep them in a nice controlled environment. But yeah, I would probably feel the same way as Kool-Aid right here. I would try someone's bud wash bud, but I don't think I want. I experimented myself once, and I mean maybe somebody else might have a different experience than me, but for me, it's not for me. Henry David Thoreau. Anyway, I'm going to hop off for now, guys. I will see you guys later this afternoon when me and Gene is on Future Cannabis Project. I'll be in the chat. Remember, bokashiearthworks.net, save 20. You can go save 20% on the website right now. Peace, guys.